When we come to a discussion of what is biblicism and what is confessionalism, I think it's very important that we understand what most people mean by biblicism. When the term biblicism comes up, you'll frequently hear somebody say, no creed but the Bible, or they'll say something to the effect of, we only use the terms that are found in the Scriptures and nothing else. And as much as that is trying to get at, I guess at a popular level, the idea that Scripture alone is our authority, one of the things that creeps into that is frequently in the history of the church, that sort of idea, we only use this particular phrase in Scripture and we don't allow any other concept or term to be used to explain Scripture. What happens frequently is you'll get debates about heresy and other things. This particular cry of no creed but the Bible was very common. You could hear that in the early 5th century as people would say, we don't even want to use the Nicene Creed or the Apostles' Creed. We want to understand the Scriptures in our own particular way when it comes to the person and work of Christ. And that led to a debate in the church about who exactly is Jesus, with some people claiming that Jesus was not fully man or he was not fully God. And so a lot of the terms that developed in that environment were things that found their way into the early creeds. These were attempts to exegete the Scriptures for public confession of faith. So that, contrary to popular belief, creeds and confessions are actually exegetical reflections on what the Scriptures mean and how those govern our communities. So one of the things that you find in this period, in the modern period, is you'll frequently hear people talk about my truth, or you'll hear them talk about I believe this, or I believe that, or I feel that this is the way things should be. And in that environment, it's important to realize that what's being put to the fore in biblicism is the primacy of the individual, whether it's their own reason in their approach to Scripture, or it's their own feeling. So in both of those situations, you're dealing with someone who is trying to understand the Scriptures on their own terms, without any connection to history, without any connection to the life of the church or anything that's come before it. So one of the dangers of biblicism is that it isolates the reader actually from the whole history of what God has done among His people and in the history of the church. Confessionalism, by contrast, is an attempt to link our beliefs not only to what we see in the Scriptures today, but also to what has always been the case in the history of the church and what has been claimed by the people of God. Now, that has developed over time, and that's why there's been different creeds and confessions in the articulation. It's not that the truth has changed as much as the explanation of it has. So that's a very important point to realize, that as we come to these different things like the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed, or if you're in Reformed circles, when we talk about things like the Westminster Standards, or if you're in the Reformed churches, the three forms of unity, what is coming to the fore in this instance, and why it's so relevant today, is that it's important for the church to bear witness as this is what the truth of God is, and this is what we see in the Scriptures. It's what our ministers are bound to. It's what our offices are bound to. And when you come to this church, this is what you will hear as far as the perspective on the Scriptures. So one of the things that biblicism versus confessionalism is really about is, where does the individual fit in relationship to the Scriptures? By taking a stance of confessionalism and creedalism, it puts the individual within the community of God's people, rather than putting the primacy on the individual.